Hello everyone, this is Tetrapolium, and today I'm doing something a little bit different as compared to some of my other videos. I've been finding it a little bit difficult right now to build teams or try out some new teams for the sake of making videos on them because I'm kind of wrapped up in two different tournaments at once. Of course, Revival Tournament and then another team tournament. It's hard to build with something cool and unique or novel in some way and then post a video about it, and then all my tournament opponents know what I've been messing around with this week. So not to say I'm not going to be making videos about Pokemon while I'm in tournament or for the not or for the future, but I'm going to try to mix in some more videos kind of like this that are a little bit more generalist so that I don't have to pressure myself to make so many teams. It's not easy to make teams. But this is going to be a little bit of a guide on rock resistance and ADV, and I want to give a special thanks to Mielke for sort of informing my perspective about this a little bit. I'm not saying that everything that I'm going to say here is necessarily what Mielke told me, or even that he may agree with me in this, but I want to thank him for offering his perspective and giving me the idea to make this. So let's start pretty basic with what is a rock resist. Rock resists are technically Pokemon that have a type that resists rock, or that their type combination resists rock. So it would be your fighting, ground, and steel. But I think that is not going to be quite sufficient in describing what the role of like a rock resist is. So I'm going to more broadly open it up to Pokemon whose defensive traits, which include its type, its stats, and its moves, make it conducive for checking the common rock type threats. So we're going to be talking about some Pokemon who technically take neutral damage from rock, as if they're rock resists. And it'll make a little more sense if you're familiar with the context of the tier. If you're not familiar with the context of the tier, we're going to talk a little bit about what the rock type threats are. So the important sets that we want to keep in mind are going to be from Aerodactyl, who commonly runs either Choice Band or Lychee Berry. These two sets are pretty similar in concept, but the idea with Lychee Berry is to substitute all the way down to like 25% health or whatever range that you're needing to get to Lychee. Is 25 is the max health you can have to proc it. So that's commonly what Aerodactyl does. Using Substitute, and because it's so much faster than everything else in the tier, it's very, very easy for it to get that Substitute down and not take any damage from direct moves. So if it's in a situation where it can sweep through a team with that +1 boost, given that it can switch up its moves, it can be a very dangerous endgame cleaner. Choice Band, I think we're all a little bit more familiar with. It's the more common of the two sets. It just has a lot of breaking power right away because it gives you that 1.5 times boost, but it's lacking in flexibility because you're not able to switch your moves up after you've decided to lock into one. So there are going to be some Pokemon that we'll talk about as rock resists who can switch in very well to an Aerodactyl Rock Slide, but maybe they don't switch in so well to an Earthquake or a Hidden Power Flying, or I mean, I don't think any of them switch in super duper terribly to Double Edge, but I guess some of them don't switch into Double Edge quite as well as you would hope for your Aerodactyl counter. The next Pokemon, of course, that we're going to talk about is Tyranitar, and there's a lot of sets on this screen. I understand that. We're going to talk about them one at a time. So here's a little key on the side. First one, DD Tar. This is pretty much your standard run-of-the-mill. I see a lead Tyranitar. I guess it's probably this. That's not always true. I don't even know if it's the most common of the Tyranitars to lead, but like this is your basic set that you have to know, you have to respect that your opponent could be this if you don't have any information on their Tyranitar or their team. So Dragon Dance, of course, is going to boost the attack and the speed of Tyranitar. It's going to be very scary because a fast Tyranitar with the amount of attack that it has, Rock Slide is going to be a really strong win condition. There are a lot of Pokemon who might be able to take 1+1 Rock Slide, but if you get flinched or crit, which is not terrible odds to happen, Rock Slide has that 30% flinch chance, of course, you could be in a lot of trouble. So that's why Rock Resists are pretty important. It's to stop generally these variants of Tyranitar and to some extent Aerodactyl as well from running away with the game. So it's going to just have coverage moves from there. Earthquake, you're going to notice that almost every Pokemon that we're talking about that is using a Rock-type move, particularly Rock Slide, is packing Earthquake. It just synergizes so well. There are a lot of types that Rock is resisted by that Earthquake hits pretty well. Steel is the most notable of them. I guess Fighting is just hit for neutral, and Ground is just hit for neutral as well. But I mean, getting one of them super effective is nice, and being neutral on the others is nice as well. But also, Rock Slide covers for Earthquake's weaknesses not too badly either. Earthquake notably cannot hit any flying types, but Rock Slide is going to be super effective to flying types, so that's pretty good. Last move is going to be more coverage. They list on Smogon's strategy decks HP Bug, HP Grass, and Ice Beam as options. I think that there are plenty of other options you could go for as well in that slot. You could go for potentially Double Edge, you could go for Brick Break or Focus Punch. You could even do something like Taunt or Roar on your fast Tyranitar. That's fine as well, I think. I mean, it kind of depends on how your team is structured. But I do agree that Hidden Power Bug, at the very least, is going to be the most common of these options that you'll see. Number 2, it's a very similar looking set, but the EVs are pretty different. This is the bulky DD Tyranitar. This set is designed to live a Earthquake from Dugtrio, and then outspeed base 100s if they're not a plus speed nature at +1, and then it also will outspeed +1 Salamence if you're at +2. I know that's a little bit complicated, but trust me, this speed stat is pretty important. I think you could do a little bit more investment even if you want to, so that when you're at +1 with your Tyranitar, you'll be faster than Moltres. Although Moltres has kind of been losing popularity as of recent. I don't know if anybody else has noted that, but I haven't seen very much Moltres in tournament or on ladder. I mean, you know, occasionally, of course, but I think I'm starting to see Pokemon like Registeel more commonly than Moltres, which is a little bit crazy. But then again, I'm not using a lot of Moltres myself, so it's not like I have much room to talk. So I do think it has some notably bad matchups, particularly into Aerodactyl, but it's okay. Let's talk now about BKC Tars. This is known, I think, on Smogon as bulky physical attacker or something like that, but we all know it as BKC Tar, the 4 attacks Tyranitar. I guess sometimes you could run Roar on this as well. That, to me, that would make it not quite a BKC Tar, but the nature of having all 4 coverage moves that you could ever want on Tyranitar is what makes it BKC. Named obviously after the GOAT, one of the greatest Pokemon players to ever exist. Actually, I know somebody's going to contend that in the comment section, and I'm just going to say, like, BKC, easily top 25 all-time player. All right, let's not argue about that. All right, so yeah, this set has a lot of breaking power because of the 252 attack EVs and adamant nature, and it also has some pretty good bulk. It can take a lot of singular hits with that much HP, but it has no speed, so it's not really designed to be a sweeper in a sense, like the DD sets kind of are. So it's not as potent as a win condition, but it is still really annoying to have to switch into really, really strong rock slides and focus punches in the mid game. So, like, don't sleep on this set. This is a very good one. And then Choice Band is going to take that breaking power and just put it to level 101 even. It's cheating, frankly. If you're using Choice Band Tyranitar, you're cheating in my books. Don't go back and watch my first ever video on ADV and see what Tyranitar set I was using there. But yes, this has got the same sort of coverage as your BKC Tar, which is not surprising, but you're going to trade some of the longevity, some of the counter-punching nature of the Tyranitar to get immediate breaking power, and it's very, very strong. And because Choice Band is kind of underutilized in the metagame right now, it does catch a lot of people off guard. Some players will go to something like a Skarmory thinking, okay, I can roar them out if they Dragon Dance, and if they just Rock Slide straight up, then it's only going to be doing about 30%, and then you're doing like 50%, and it's like, oh, my Skarmory's in a lot of danger right now. That could be really bad. And a good Rock Resist is going to be something that can kind of switch into those Choice Banded hits, as well as contain these Dragon Dance variants, and maybe even also threatening to the bulkier variants of the Tyranitar. So we're asking these Pokemon to do a lot to counter one singular Pokemon, which is kind of nasty, but I promise you, this tier is so much better off for having Tyranitar than not. If you don't believe me, try playing some Sandless Stall versus other people who are playing Sandless Stall. I'm speaking from experience. I'm the sicko who's using Sandless Stall on ladder and in tournaments. But there's more. The rock types, or I should say, just as the rock resists are not all Pokemon that resist rock, the rock types are not always rock type Pokemon. This is, I know, we're kind of straying very far away from Game Freak's intent, but I think this will make a little bit of sense when I show you what I'm talking about here. First is Metagross. Metagross is not a rock type. It is Steel and Psychic, but it really, really commonly has coverage that you expect to see on the rock type Pokemon. Mostly Earthquake, but in a lot of cases also Rock Slide. Not every single Metagross is packing Rock Slide. There are a lot of Metagross that can't really fit it. If you wanted something like Protect or Toxic or like Hidden Power Grass or something like that, then it's just not really worth going for the Rock Slide on your Metagross. But two sets do notably use it. Choice Band, who most commonly has it as the fourth move. BKC, we just talked about him and his Tyranitar on the previous slide, has a pretty nice video on what you could do for the fourth move on Metagross, because those first three moves, Meteor Mash, Explosion, and Earthquake, are given on Choice Band Metagross. You could do HP Bug, you could do Brick Break. I think he talks about Sludge Bomb as an option, and even Toxic. I think all of those have a place, but Rock Slide is just generally going to be the nastiest because it helps to hit your switch-ins, primarily Zapdos and Moltres, and I guess also Charizard. So yeah, it can be kind of brutal for that. It's also not so bad at eliminating a chipped Skarmory if it switches into a banded Rock Slide. It's got to dodge a crit or a flinch in a lot of cases to survive. So that's not great prospects there. But we also have Agility Metagross, and sometimes Agility Metagross will drop Explosion to have Rock Slide, which is going to help you to sweep through teams that have a lot of flying types on them. For example, Zapdos or Aerodactyl in the back. Well, I guess you already have Meteor Mash to hit Aerodactyl, but you do have a little bit more accuracy with Rock Slide, and it also is sometimes better as a mid-ground. In case they are running like a Superman-ish type team. Maybe they have Zapdos plus Aerodactyl. But Gyarados is another good one to hit, and it's really nice because you have that clear body to nullify the Intimidate attack drop. And then finally, let's talk about Salamence. So Salamence is, on its physical sets, is very commonly running Rock Slide and also Earthquake. Generally, its coverage move of choice is Hidden Power Flying, or I shouldn't even say coverage, it's its stab. But you may also see Brick Break. I've seen Hidden Power Ghost and Hidden Power Bug before. I don't really like that, but I guess it's a possibility. Again, I probably wouldn't recommend it. That just sounds like bad Aerodactyl to me, but like, I don't know, maybe you could stack it on a team with Aerodactyl and go crazy and hammer all the nails that are sticking up at you, namely Celebi and Gengar. But in any case, this is the typical Salamence, and I think I've spent enough time talking about the Pokemon that we're trying to beat. Let's talk about what we're going to beat them with. So I have a little tier list going. We're going to quickly go over what these tiers mean. Most of them are going to be pretty self-explanatory, but up at the top we have the Rock, which is to remind us which Pokemon we're interested in checking, which are going to be the 4 Pokemon that we just talked about on the last couple slides. Rock Resist by Technicality is Pokemon that might resist Rock, but they can't usually win versus Rock types. And note that I'm going to be talking mostly about Pokemon that I've seen before in the ADV tier. Like, I know something like Hitmonchan, technically speaking, resists Rock, but I don't think I've ever seen it. There may be some Pokemon like Hitmonlee. Okay, maybe I've seen it like once, but like, it's not a super duper serious Pokemon. We're going to talk about some Pokemon who are maybe on the borderline of being serious, but I think all of these Pokemon at the very least were ranked on the viability rankings, at the very least that somebody had given a vote to them. I think except for one of them, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Can only switch into CB Rock Slide. That's basically for the Pokemon who are really good at coming in and forcing out the CB locked Pokemon that are going for Rock Slide, but every other one of their sets basically you're getting smashed by. We could talk about that, I guess, for Magneton in a sense, but Magneton doesn't really want to come into your Tyranitars and your Salamences that much. I'm kind of giving the game away a little bit talking about Magneton, so let's move on. Can switch into Tara's Rock Slide. Basically, it's just Pokemon that can tank a Rock Slide and then threaten Tyranitar out in some way. This is not always applicable to something like Salamence, because Salamence has slightly different coverage, namely that Hidden Power Flying. It's not always applicable to Metagross either because of the Meteor Mash, but you can kind of think about this as Pokemon that are either bulky enough to take that like 2 hits, or Pokemon that are going to be really good at killing Tyranitar in a one-on-one situation. Pseudo-Rock Resists are going to be Pokemon that don't resist Rock, but they have longevity and or threaten them in some other way. Pokemon that are not really, like, they don't resist Rock Slide from Tyranitar, but they're pretty good at beating Tyranitar. You could think about it like that. Not always the case. There's going to be some room for nuance here, but we'll continue. Need some support versus rock spam are good into some of the sets that these rock type Pokemon, quote unquote, that we're talking about use, but they're going to need some slightly more ideal conditions in order to beat them. And usually that means that you're going to need to support them in some way. Maybe that's removing spikes. Maybe that's getting chip. Maybe that's having a secondary rock resist in a lot of cases. Good rock resists are going to be Pokemon that are pretty good into most of the sets that we're talking about. They might not be great into every move. Like maybe they don't want to come in on a CB double edge from Aerodactyl, but if they come in on the right move from Aerodactyl, then they're going to be beating Aerodactyl. Or they have some certain techs that can help them into a lot of the sets. Generally, like, favorable matchups here. And then the great rock resists are going to be the ones that are pretty much good into all of the previously discussed sets that we talked about. And again, it's always a little bit context dependent, but I think at least these two we might have some agreement on that we'll talk about here, kind of spoiling that there's only two. But we're going to get on with this. Keep in mind, again, take my opinions with a grain of salt here. I do have this kind of in a tier list ranking, but this is not really to say I think this is the absolute best Tyranitar counter in the game. There are contexts and teams where some of these Pokemon work a little better than others, and I also might be like not right about some of these, and you can certainly let me know about that in the comments. But we've been rambling on long enough. Let's get into it. And we're mostly going to be considering the best typical defensive spreads for these Pokemon. You know, obviously they're not going to be as good at beating the rock resist if they're full on attack invested, if that's not really what they're built to do. So yeah, let's get that disclaimer out of the way as well. So rock resist by Technicality, I think this one's pretty obvious. It's going to be Magneton. Magneton is really designed to just trap mostly Skarmory. In some cases, it can be good into Metagross, particularly Choice Band Metagross, if you can come in and catch that while it's going for a Meteor Mash. That's really nice. And if you have leftovers, that makes you a little bit more bulky, a little more resistant there. But virtually speaking, Magneton, if it switches into one of these rock types that we discussed, and it's not choice locked, it's getting destroyed. And even if it is a choice locked, say Tyranitar, you're going to be taking so much damage from Rock Slide, and potentially they're faster than you. Now, Choice Band tends to run Adamant, and Magneton tends to be faster than Adamant Tyranitar. But in cases where that's not true, you're also putting the flinch odds on top of Magneton here. So I don't think this is like good as a rock resist. I wouldn't say on my team I have Swampert and I have Magneton, therefore I have 2 rock resists. Not really. Maybe I'd say like 1.5. But yeah, Magneton, not great for it. It's great in other contexts though, and I think it's really, really nice when paired with some of these rock resists, because it handles some of the Pokemon that these rock resists are not so great into. Take, for example, water types like Milotic and sometimes Suicune. If you have the right Magneton set for that, that can be pressure on those Pokemon. It also helps with removing Skarmory, where a lot of these Pokemon do not want to deal with spikes. So, still a good Pokemon to put on a team that you want to be robust against rock spam, but not really a rock resist. So, going on, this is Aggron. I think this is the only Pokemon that we're going to talk about that didn't get like any love. Oh no, that's not true. We'll talk about like maybe 2 more. But this Pokemon is really bad. Despite what your eyes might tell you about its stats, the 180 base defense, you think, oh yeah, that's really good. But the thing that you have to recognize is its defensive type. Steel Rock, that's got to be one of the worst type combinations that has Steel in it. This is with the Sub Punch Aggron, which is the first Smogon set that comes up. You have 228 HP, 0 defense. if you come into a Jolly Tyranitar Earthquake, you are going to be taking 79 to 93%. That is really tough, especially for a Spike Weak Pokemon. So really, all you can do with Aggron is come in when it's a revealed Choice Band and they're locked into Rock Slide. Or, like, I don't know if you're calling them out on some crazy stuff. For Aerodactyl, if this is a Lychee Berry Aerodactyl that does not have the Choice Band, it's still doing 67 to 79% right there. So, like, if Aerodactyl, you come in on Aerodactyl thinking that it's going to be a CB Rock Slide and it goes for Earthquake, or sorry, if it goes for Substitute, then your Rock Resist is scared out immediately. So that's really, really bad. Not to mention that this Pokemon is not so great into either Salamence or Metagross. A boost from either of them is going to threaten to kill with Earthquake on most of the Aggron sets that you would be running. And if you're even running this Pokemon, it's also not good at coming into Focus Punch from Tyranitar, if it has that. And it's also slower than all of the Pokemon. If you're slower than Tyranitar and you're like super duper dying to Earthquake, like, I don't care what your defensive profile is. I don't care if you're immune to Rock-type moves, and it's not a fantastic Rock Resist. So this is the slide that I dedicated to crapping on Aggron. I hope you enjoyed it. Let's move on to a slightly better class of Pokemon here, which are the Pokemon that can actually switch into Tar's Rock Slide and not be completely scared when it reveals that it's not Choice Band damage. And that is this group of Pokemon here. So I took some liberties, of course. How real are Golem, Nidoking, Nidoqueen, and Poliwrath in this tier really? Probably not that real, but I have seen them before. I have built with some of them before, so they're good enough to make the list in my eyes. All the Hitmontop fans out there, sorry, but I just don't see it for that Pokemon. But yeah, I'm not going to get too much into the particulars of each of these Pokemon, but I want to note that a lot of these are fighting types. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. We have Hariyama, Machamp, Breloom, and Medicham, all of which are the UUBL fighters or higher that do not have a dual type that is weak to Rock. So that would be Blaziken's Fire is weak to Rock, and Heracross's Bug is weak to Rock, so they don't really resist Tyranitar's Rock Slide. Now, they can both kind of come in to one, maybe. Blaziken a little less so, but let's not split too many hairs about which Pokemon can eat a Rock Slide and then force Tyranitar out. I digress. So, yeah. I'll point out which one of these Pokemon can take the follow-up Earthquake idea. Your Golem and Rhydon have enough defense with their slightly, like, at least their HP invested sets, which for the most part you're investing in HP. They're too slow to really go that serious with speed. But if you have some HP investment, they actually do take Earthquake not too badly. I mean, like, it still does a lot, but it's doing like closer to 50% than 80%. So that's good to know. And because they have the really strong stab Earthquakes, they can threaten Tyranitar out. Same sort of idea with Aerodactyl. If you land a Rock Slide on Aerodactyl, it's probably just dead. So that's really nice. Not so great into Metagross, I will admit. Metagross, if it switches up and goes for Meteor Mash, is going to be doing a lot. These Pokemon can live it if it's not a banded Metagross, of course, but yeah, I mean, your Earthquake only does but so much back. I mean, it's a lot, but not usually killing. Maybe unless you're Choice Band. Because Metagross is a beast. So that would describe those two pretty well. The rest of these Pokemon, to some degree, they either will outspeed Tyranitar and kill it, or they can also kind of take another hit. So like Machamp and Hariyama, not super duper likely to outspeed Tyranitar unless you run a lot of investment and they're like BKC-tar, but you can take that hit on follow-up, and they're pretty good at doing it, and they're pretty good at doing other stuff as well. Like, if you have a Rock Resist for Golem and Rhydon, like some of the Pokemon we'll talk about later, it's not that hard to switch them in on these two. Whereas for Machamp and Hariyama, most of the time they're hitting big neutral damage on the things that would like to come in on Rock-type moves, or sometimes even super effective. Not that that really matters. It's just a coverage move for them, but they also do have other things like Bulk Up or Focus Punch, or in the case of Hariyama, Knock Off, that are going to be really dangerous. Breloom and Dugtrio and Metacham are the squishiest of these, but they do huge damage to Tyranitar if Tyranitar stays in to take their moves. Breloom deserves a bit of a special shout out because it has Mach Punch, so it doesn't even really matter if Tyranitar has a bunch of Dragon Dance stacks. You can still threaten a lot of damage on it. Now, it won't usually one-shot Tyranitar because Tyranitar is a very balanced Pokemon, but with a little bit of chip, and especially if that's a Lumberry Tyranitar, you can secure the kill pretty easily with Mach Punch. We do have also Blastoise and Poliwrath. Both of these have water-type attacking moves to hit the Tyranitar with. Poliwrath also has its stab fighting-type moves, and Poliwrath, like, I'm kind of shocked at how good its defenses are for what it is. Like, it's actually not terrible, and with 70 base speed, it actually is really well suited at taking on Tyranitar in small doses. Now, of course, any Pokemon can get overwhelmed, especially Pokemon that aren't just like immune to all of the coverage moves that Tyranitar has. It's still going to be taking a good chunk from Earthquake and Focus Punch, but just wanted to give a special shout out to our boy here because we don't really see him that often. But that doesn't mean I've never seen him. It doesn't mean I've never used him. That does mean I'm not making a video on him anytime soon, though, because he's not good. But yeah, Sand Weakness is holding a lot of these Pokemon back from being, like, good Rock Resists. So, like, if Hariyama and Machamp didn't take Sand damage, honestly, they might be much better Rock Resists because they have some pretty good bulk. They are threatening huge damage, and they're just really nasty Pokemon for Tyranitar and Aerodactyl not locked into the right move to deal with. And yeah, that would be actually kind of fire if they were. Now, of course, all the fighting types are going to be not so great into Salamence. DD Salamence, if it gets a DD and it has HP flying, which very commonly those two things go together, it's just threatening to kill pretty much all of them, unless you're running like a ridiculously high defense investment set. But that's just something to note there. It's kind of why Blastoise is here, because it's really good into Metagross and Salamence as well, because it's resisting Meteor Mash and it has Ice Beam coverage. But unlike some other water types that we're about to talk about, it doesn't really have any recovery, so its longevity is kind of compromised there. And if it was sand immune, then that might not be that big a deal in the long run. We might be able to give Blastoise a little bit more flowers for this role, but as it stands, it's kind of middling in its prowess, we'll say. I wouldn't say that this tier is ordered in any particular way, so like don't pay too much attention to this and say like, oh, Hariyama is so much better on Rock Resist than Nidoking, for example, or that Dugtrio is a great Rock Resist, but Rhydon is not so good, you know? So, yeah, all these Pokemon in this tier are slightly better in certain situations than others, and all okay at the Tyranitar matchup at the least. Let's check back in at our tier list here. You might notice that Metang is making an appearance up in the Rock tier. That is because Metagross is unavailable right now. He's gone on vacation. Maybe we'll see him come back at some point. It's actually because we're going to be talking about Metagross, spoiler alert, but this is what we're looking at right now. Aggron getting its own dishonorable tier to itself there. Honestly, should just be put in with Magneton by Rock Resist by Technicality. In fact, I don't know. I think I probably would rather have Magneton threatening to get a Toxic or a Thunder Wave off than whatever weak move that Aggron's going to go for. Sorry, that's just a Aggron slander for no reason. Let's just move on. Pseudo-Rock Resists. So I talked about this concept in a few of my videos now, but to put it kind of more comprehensively here, Pseudo-Rock Resist are Pokemon that don't resist Rock-type moves, but they have decent matchups into Rock-type attackers, and many of them are Meteor Mash resists. Not all of them that we'll talk about here. We have Regirock as a notable exception to that, but we have 3 Bulky Waters and Skarmory here. So all of these Pokemon, if healthy, can switch into a Tyranitar Rock Slide and then threaten to do not so nice things to the Tyranitar. So these are some of the traits that make them pretty good at beating down on Tyranitar and Aerodactyl, and in some cases Salamence and Metagross as well. So we'll start from the right. Vaporeon has Wish and super effective Stab. I want to note that Vaporeon has the most super effective Stab of all of these options because it has a 110 special attack stat, which means that if you're modest and running Hydro Pump, you have a guaranteed kill on Tyranitar even if it's running 252 HP, which is something that none of these other Pokemon can really do unboosted. I mean, Regirock may be, because it has Superpower, which does a lot of damage, but at least from the special side and not at the cost of you losing your stats on hit, Vaporeon is the best at doing that. But if we're doing a defensive Vaporeon, then we can Wish and Protect. Our Surf is strong enough to threaten 2-hit KOs on virtually every Tyranitar, even without any investment. So I think that Vaporeon kind of checks out here. It's also really nice into Metagross. Comes in on the Meteor Mash resisted. Very, very easy to slot Protect or Substitute on your Vaporeon. So you have a pretty safe move to click in front of the Metagross, and you're threatening it out with pretty strong neutral damage from your Water-type move of choice. So I think that we should be putting some respect on Vaporeon. Also having Ice Beam to hit Salamence is not bad. Haze as well is an option. That's something that none of the other of these Pokemon get. It gives you the opportunity to reset anything that's getting out of control, like a Metagross Meteor Mash Raise, or a Tyranitar that's going for the second Dragon Dance, or things like that. Regirock has a really, really good defense stat. It's base 200, which is, I believe, the highest in the tier. Yeah, I don't think no, technically Shuckle is higher. Okay, but Shuckle's not a real Pokemon, so we're going to ignore it for the sake of this discussion. It's also weak to Rock Slide, so so much for being a good defensive wall. But Regirock, really, really good defense. It makes it so that these coverage Earthquakes don't really feel like super effective hits. Now, they still do a decent chunk of damage to Regirock, but that's not so bad because Regirock is threatening to do a lot of damage back with Counter. Counter is really, really brutal for all of these primarily physical attackers that don't really have another way to break through Regirock. And you also have Thunder Wave to sort of stop the sweeping potential of some of these Rock-type Pokemon, as well as Superpower to hit Tyranitar for a lot of damage. So all of those traits kind of come together, despite the fact that Regirock does not resist Rock-type moves, despite the fact that it's weak to Ground-type moves, it can act as like a Pseudo-Rock Resist. Suicune, definitely like one of the more classic examples of a Pseudo-Rock Resist. It has ridiculously high defensive stats, 100 base HP, 115 base defense, and if you invest in it with a bold nature, like, it's extremely difficult for rock types to break through Suicune. In fact, many of them, like Aerodactyl, might not even be able to 3-hit KO Suicune, which can be important in sandless games. So, though, of course, crit and flinch can happen, though Suicune's pressure ability makes it so that they only have 8 opportunities maximum to try for that against Suicune, so that's definitely good to know. You're very on top of it with keeping your Suicune healthy and diligent about making them use up their PP, then Suicune can just win the game. Now, again, that's why it's kind of a Pseudo-Rock Resist. Being almost a 3-hit KO threshold is really, really dangerous because of the flinch chance from Rock Slide. But having the attack power that Suicune does kind of offsets that. Also, needless to say, like with Vaporeon, pretty good into Metagross and pretty good into Salamence as well. It also has phasing to just get rid of anything like a Salamence that's Dragon Dancing up. I guess also a Tyranitar. It's kind of scary prospects to try to counter Tyranitar or a DD'd Tyranitar with your Suicune, because they could just get the flinch, and that can be really brutal for you, but it's definitely an option if you need it. Skarmory, similar sort of case. It's a little bit of Regirock and Suicune traits mixed together. It has the phasing, and it has the great defense. It also has spikes, which can be really, really annoying for Tyranitar and Metagross in particular. Also, the things that are supporting those Pokemon. So, Skarmory can do a pretty good job there. It is not super duper hard to fit Protect on a Skarmory set as well. So, that can give you some turns to chip heal and to let Toxic damage stack up if you're running Toxic. It also will help you to see what choice banded Pokemon are locking into. If they try to predict your switch and going for a move like Earthquake or Double Edge, then Skarmory is loving life. It's really easy for it to stay in on those moves. So, yeah. Like Regirock, it is sand immune, so it gets that chip healing from leftovers. I didn't mention it so much with Regirock because sometimes Regirock likes to run Choice Band. But you're almost always going to be running leftovers on Skarmory, and if you're not, you're almost always going to be stealing them. So that's kind of just going to do it for Skarmory. Great Mon. And helpful in some senses against the rock types. Milotic is probably the best of the Pseudo-Rock Resist because it has the immediate recovery with the move Recover. It also has some pretty strong, super effective stab. Uninvested, Surf is still going to be threatening 2-hit KOs on pretty much all Tyranitars. So it's a very solid Pokemon there. But Milotic kind of runs into the issue that a lot of these Pokemon run into, which is why they're Pseudo-Rock Resists. And that is you're 1 or 2 rock slide flinches away from not being very good at beating the rock type Pokemon anymore. So, yeah, like if they can flinch you once or twice, get you into range of the next attack, whether it be Salamence's HP flying or another rock slide from Tyranitar or Earthquake from Metagross, then like yeah, it's tough. And to say like, well, it's not that likely to happen. I mean, it kind of is because Milotic is going to have to spend like half of its turns clicking recover. So you're not getting very many opportunities to slow them down by getting damage or by getting your toxic off. You might be able to do that uh, once or twice, depending on what their set is, and really put the pressure on them. But yeah, I would say Milotic gets haxed a lot. I think of it as like a hax magnet because it is slower than a lot of things. It is just wanting to take hits and sponge them up, and it needs to get those recover turns off to stay healthy and relevant in the fight. But yeah, you know, 1 or 2 bad turns, a crit, a flinch, it can be bad for Milotic, and it's bad for all of these Pokemon as well. Not unique situation to Milotic, but it just feels like it happens to Milotic more. I don't know if you guys feel that as well, but yeah, Milotic is Suicune gets hacked quite a bit too. It spends a lot of turns asleep, so a lot of turns to get crit, but I digress. Now we're going to talk about some Pokemon that need some support versus Rock Spam. These are, for the most part, Pokemon that do resist Rock and can do some nasty things to the Rock types with some proper positioning and against certain sets that they're good against. But there are also some pretty big drawbacks that make them not super robust as like solo Rock Resist. These are the kind of Pokemon that if you're saying I want to be solid into Aerodactyl teams, or I want to be solid into DD Tyranitar, that you probably don't want just these as on the team. You could maybe get away with a Pseudo-Rock Resist, depending on what your team structure is like. You maybe want to get something from a higher tier up here. But yeah, I don't want to get too much into the calculus of you need to have exactly this many Pokemon from this tier or this many Pokemon from this tier to accomplish this sort of goal. I think there's a lot more creativity in the team builder than boiling it down to that. But there are some decent rules of thumb that people might say, like you want to have 2 Rock Resists, and maybe they would consider that to be at a certain tier or higher. Maybe this is the first tier that they're considering as like Rock Resists. You can definitely team build that way, and you can definitely play the game that way, but I'm telling you that it's not super duper required of you to think about it that way. But here are the Pokemon. We'll go from the right here. Marowak has pretty decent physical bulk and has a really, really strong stab Earthquake, threatening a lot of the rock Pokemon that we're talking about, mostly Tyranitar and Metagross. But if it comes in on the right turn against Aerodactyl, it's got a really strong hidden power Rock or Rock Slide. It also has, pretty good moves to slam into choice locked Salamence, particularly one that is locked into Rock Slide. Now, we'll get into the obvious issue with Marowak after I get through the rest of these. I think it's pretty good. Marowak has the most glaring issue of these Pokemon, but we'll get to it in a moment. Jirachi. Jirachi is like, if Earthquake didn't exist, Jirachi would be one of the best defensive Pokemon in the game. But because Earthquake exists, and because all the Rock-type Pokemon use it, it's really scary for Jirachi to sort of be the bearer of the burden. But Jirachi loves to be paired with levitating Pokemon. Uh, you see it a lot on Superman structures. So it has a lot of entry points versus CB rock type Pokemon like Aerodactyl. And if you can get it in on an Aerodactyl rock slide, depending on your Jirachi set, you can run away with the game. You can start getting those Calm Minds up. You could get behind a substitute. You could wish something else up that can win the game. Like, it can get really nasty, or you can get Body Slam off, and whatever comes in, if they don't want to get paralyzed 60% of the time, it's really tough for them. They're just going to have to accept that. So I do think that while Jirachi does not have the most fantastic pressure into Tyranitar, it still is decent in some contexts, though we'll talk more about the Tyranitar issue in a moment. Registeel has really good base stats for this, 80 HP and 150 defense. We don't really talk too much about the special defense of these Pokemon, but Registeel has a really good 150 special defense as well. That can be really nice for handling certain coverage moves. Like, a lot of these Pokemon will sometimes run like a Fire Blast or a Hidden Power Grass or something as a sort of other option. And Registeel's not even scared of Hidden Power, of Fire Blast that much. Even a specially attack invested Tyranitar is not usually going to get a 2-hit KO on Registeel with Fire Blast if you have some Spadef investment. So that's going to be a good trait for Registeel. It also, like Regirock, has access to Thunder Wave and Counter as sort of countermeasures to the rock types. Unfortunately, while it does have superpower, it is quite a bit weaker than Regirock, so I wouldn't really recommend trying for it. It's not really going to go great for you, but yeah, Regirock is Registeel is pretty solid here. Quagsire has a pretty good type combo of Water Ground. We'll probably talk about that later. But know that that's pretty good for Metagross and Tyranitar, and I guess Aerodactyl as well. You have access to Ice Beam, which is nice for hitting Salamence, although I will say that Ice Beam damage is pretty pathetic. It's you would hope that it would be close to a one-shot kill, but it is like borderline not even getting the two-shot in some cases. So that's not cool. But all told, with a Curse and Rest set, Quagsire can be really annoying for a team that has been whittled down to just their rock Pokemon. And then finally we have Steelix, who has a monstrous defense stat, I believe of... Is it 180? I think it's 180. I did a whole video on this guy and I don't remember. Shows how real a Steelix fan I am. It's actually, I think, 200. Okay, there you go. So it's tied with Regirock there. Somebody was yelling at me in the comments about that when I made my Regirock comment. But here is Steelix with the Steel Ground type and a 200 defense stat. It is basically as close to a rock immunity as you're going to get in the game, because most rock slides are going to be doing basically just enough for you to not get leftovers chip healing. So, yeah, that's really, really brutal. However, Steelix does have some issues that make it, in my opinion, not like a super duper great rock resist. And we're going to go over the issues of all of these Pokemon here. So we'll start with Steelix and zipper back around. Steelix is kind of a momentum sink. Like, yeah, you come in on an Aerodactyl that's going for Rock Slide, and it's like, oh man, I can't do anything with my Aerodactyl anymore. And then they're like, well, what if I just switch to like Charizard or something? Well, okay, maybe that's not the best case scenario because Steelix could be packing a Rock-type move, but depending on what moves you're using on Steelix, you might not even have good coverage to take advantage of switches. You're probably just getting a Toxic off at best, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, that's pretty good, but there are some teams that are pretty robust against Toxic and the like. Steelix is just, in a lot of cases, really passive, and the sets that try to make Steelix not so passive, like Choice Band, it runs into some other issues, like longevity and having to click Boom, and honestly, it's still not even that strong. There are a lot of Pokemon that don't even quite resist Earthquake that would put Steelix in a bind. So it is, I would say it's probably the most good at being a rock resist of all of the 5 Pokemon on the screen here, but like it is just so easy at letting in other Pokemon like Skarmory, for example, that I don't love it. Quagsire, I mean, it just has some pretty bad stats all around. It doesn't have great, doesn't have access to, for example, Hydro Pump to threaten a lot of damage on all the Rock-type Pokemon. Your best move to hit Aerodactyl, I guess technically is Surf, but on the set that you're probably going to see Quagsire running, it's Ice Beam. And, like, okay, it does decent damage to Aerodactyl. I think it might threaten a 2-hit KO. Which I'm not even exactly sure about because Quagsire's got such a low special attack. But, like, it's so easy to switch into, right? Yes, you can get your curses up, and in cases where they don't have a phaser and they don't have like a strong HP grass left, then Quagsire can certainly win the game, but like it's still like so bad into a lot of Pokemon, and of course its father is something that we're going to be talking about later. Although, I guess it depends on how you see it. Like, is the Pokemon that is better the father, or the Pokemon that wins the matchup the father? Because I've heard that Quagsire is actually pretty good in that matchup. I'll be a little less coy and tell you that it's a Pokemon that shares a type combination with Quagsire, but for those of you who are a little less paying attention, you're just going to have to wait to see what that is. Registeel. So I have written under there Viltar. This is a set that we did not talk about, but it is the variant of Tyranitar that runs Substitute and the moves Rock Slide, Focus Punch, and Hidden Power Bug. The issue with this set, when it gets behind a Substitute, Registeel cannot Thunder Wave it. And then Registeel also does not have a great move to break Substitute on Tyranitar in a lot of cases, because usually you're running mono Seismic Toss. Seismic Toss will not break Viltar's Substitute because it has 404 HP. So then Tyranitar is just going to slam Focus Punches into you. And yes, you can break the Substitute by going for Counter, but Counter isn't making like any sort of real progress, because you break that Substitute and Tyranitar is just going to set up another Substitute. Now, that is just one Registeel set. There are some other ideas you could do, like if you had Brick Break or Superpower or maybe Earthquake or even like HP Steel, you might be able to break the Substitute more effectively that way. Some of those options are not great though. Like Brick Break is such a weak ass move on Registeel. It has no stab and Registeel has 75 attack. Like that's not great, buddy. Earthquake is not stab either. Superpower, I mean, after like 2 superpowers, you probably don't even break the Substitute anymore. Okay, maybe that, I don't know if that's true necessarily, but like you're lowering your own attack and defense. And if this is a Tyranitar that is dropping HP Bug for Earthquake for some reason, or ever like you don't break the sub, you're getting smacked with a punch. Like all of those things are really, really bad for Registeel. But Registeel is still really good against a lot of these Pokemon because it's threatening that nice counter. Although I guess it also is in a similar-ish boat to Steelix, where it's not getting a lot of momentum in a lot of cases. It's a lot better because you're threatening Thunder Wave, but if they have a decent ground type that can switch in to that Thunder Wave, say like Swampert, then Registeel is a little bit less robust, I should say. I do think that maybe this is underrating Registeel a little bit. I could maybe see an argument for him to go even up to the next tier, but I mean, I do think that he is kind of exploitable in certain areas of his game, particularly his limited moveset and lack of physically offensive pressure. Like, the best move you have to pressure something is Explosion, which is not bad, but you can only really do that once. So, yeah, I think there are some knocks on Registeel. Maybe it could be higher. Comment below if you think that Registeel is underrated here. Jirachi, just really bad into DD Tar. Gets a DD up. Jirachi does not really have a move that can threaten Tyranitar immediately. Commonly, the only super effective move that Jirachi could be running is HP Grass, and that is not even close to 2-hit KOing. I think even if you're +1, you're not usually 2-hit KOing, so that's not good. You could be running Dynamic Punch, I guess, but Dynamic Punch, does not one-shot, I don't think. I mean, it might one-shot your uninvested Tyranitars, and then it also maybe depends on whether you're an attack-invested Jirachi or not, but yeah, Dynamic Punch might not one-shot, and it also just has a 50% chance to miss, so that's not really that good. All told, Jirachi really, really bad into the DD Tar variations. I mean, if you can get like a Body Slam para on a Leftovers DD Tar switching in, that's not bad. Or if you can get a Body Slam on... I mean, really, if you get a Body Slam para on any of the Pokemon that we talked about, that's not bad. Or Fire Punch Burn would be even better. But, yeah, you need to be in a dominant position for Jirachi to really, really get you out of those situations versus the Pokemon that can switch up their moves, particularly the ones that can raise their attack stat. Although, I will say, Ice Punch is doing a lot to Salamence, so that's not as scary. And then finally, we have Marowak, which lacks recovery in any form. It doesn't get the move Recover or Wish. It doesn't get Soft Boiled. Thank God it doesn't get Milk Drink. That would be really morbid. It's not even running Leftovers most of the time, which makes sense because it has a really broken item that gives it double attack just off rip. But, like, not getting that Leftovers chip healing means that it can only be but so good a Rock Resist, right? You're getting worn down by spikes. If you switch into enough Earthquakes, you're just dead. So, you can only really come in, like, once or twice and threaten to do your stuff. Or you're going to need something like Wish support to help yourself out. And yeah, I don't think that Marowak is that well suited for it. Also, Marowak a lot of times is just more offensively leaning anyway, which is what it's best at doing. So you're not going to have super duper investment. You might have max HP at the best. So that kind of is some knocks on it. I do think it's a little bit better than some of the other Pokemon that we just talked about, though, because it's not getting chipped by sand, and it has really, really strong moves to threaten out all of these Pokemon. And if you're at the right speed stat and they're the wrong set, then they're going to have to switch. So you could be faster than, say, like an Agility Metagross that has not gotten its agility off yet. So keep that in mind. DD is just rough for all of these Pokemon, but they all have some degree of dealing with that. Whether it be trying to status them as they're switching in, or on the turn that they're going for DD, or some other forms of things. I mean, Steelix has Roar, that's not bad. But I think that's kind of exhausts what we want to talk about with these guys. We're going to check back in on our tier list here, and we're going to see... we haven't talked too much about like the really good ground types in the tier. That's probably on purpose, but yeah, I think that we've already talked about some pretty good Pokemon here, like Suicune and Milotic. I think are fantastic. Skarmory, of course. Jirachi. Registeel is pretty underrated, I think, as well as a Pokemon, and it might be underrated on this list. But yeah, we're going to talk about some really, really nice Rock Resists here, though. So let's just get into it. All right. So there's our boys here. These four are just pretty good Pokemon overall. Weezing. I'm not going to hear anybody say that it's not a good Pokemon. It is, I'm telling you. All of these Pokemon are pretty good to switch into any of the aforementioned when you're at full health, particularly if you know that they're not special attackers. I mean, Flygon does not want to take an Ice Beam from Tyranitar if it's mixed. Doesn't want to take a Dragon Claw from Salamence if it's mixed. So keep that in mind. They're going to force 50-50s when the rock types are revealed. In particular, Pokemon like Aerodactyl, like it struggles immensely to hit Flygon and Claydol with the two moves that it wants to spam the most, which are going to be Rock Slide and Earthquake. So it has to click a lot of double edges to try to catch these Pokemon. And if you can catch them with your normal resist, then like it can be really, really bad for them. And they can threaten massive damage, set up, or triple the rocks with status. Of these Pokemon, I think that Weezing's got like the best defensive presence here. I mean, it just has a monstrous defense stat of 120, on top of a pretty good HP stat, I believe, of 65. Okay, it's not as good as maybe I was billing it to be, but I think what makes Weezing really, really dangerous is Will-O-Wisp. Will-O-Wisp is the death sentence of all these rock types. If you are like, man, Weezing's not that good on Rock Resist, let it get a Will-O-Wisp off and see how good a Rock Resist it is. It's going to be better than anything you could ever ask for, really. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't have great longevity overall because it is sand weak, and it is not packing moves like Recover, but it does have Pain Split to help itself out, which is not bad at all. It has Haze to stop the Dragon Dancers from getting out of control, and you could even run special attacking moves like Fire Blast or HP Grass if you need those to help you out versus some of these Pokemon. In particular, Metagross is not loving to take a Fire Blast from Weezing, especially when it could also be threatening a Will-O-Wisp. So all of that to say that Weezing is actually pretty solid, I think. I'm giving it this much respect. Also due to the fact that it's resisting Fighting, Bug, and is immune to Ground-type moves as well. So it's not taking Spikes damage. You can't catch it with an Earthquake switching in. So, like, just overall good mon. I made a video about it. You should go check it out if you want to hear more about Weezing. But let's move on to these two Pokemon here. Metagross and Flygon. They have some great offensive presence. Stab Earthquake from Flygon, doing a lot to Metagross and Tyranitar. It's also got pretty nice coverage with Rock Slide to handle Salamence and Aerodactyl. More so Aerodactyl, who's locked into Rock Slide, but similarly, a Choice-Banded Salamence could be locked into Rock Slide as well. Metagross, I mean, what do you want me to say about Metagross? It's one of the most threatening offensive Pokemon in the tier. Like 135 base attack with a 100 base power stab signature move that can raise, well, not exactly signature because Clefable gets it for some reason, but it can also raise your attack stat like it's ridiculous, and it's making me stutter. Like that's how shocking it is as a Pokemon. It's really, really good. I just made a video about Metagross, more so talking about its defensive capabilities, but those help out a lot as well. Like even being weak to Earthquake, if you stack a lot of defensive investment on it, it might not even get to it KO'd by certain Earthquakes, which is really nice because you're threatening huge damage with that Meteor Mash, even if you're not invested all that much. So Metagross, just a fantastic Rock Resist, a fantastic Pokemon overall. I do think that its more offensive sets are going to necessitate that you look into having some other defensive capabilities on your team, because Metagross is going to want to boom a lot of games. It's also not getting leftovers if it is a Lum or Choice Banded Pokemon. I think what Mialke said as a piece of advice is that you really, really want to have a bulky water with Metagross, because Metagross is not fantastic at switching into focus punches, or at least not so much as some of these bulky waters, which you might think like that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like it's just as neutral to Metagross as it is to the bulky waters. Well, like you're gonna get switched up on with Earthquake, which would do even more damage to Metagross in a lot of cases, and also, if Metagross is your only Rock Resist and it's constantly having to switch into things like Focus Punch and stuff like that, then like you're opening up the game. Maybe if it's a Focus Punching Tyranitar for the Aerodactyl in the back to win. So you need to have something that is going to be robust into that Focus Punch. And the water types, I mean, they have enough defensive capability, and they're going to be saying, no, you're not punching again all the time to your Tyranitar there, that it kind of just works out for you. I do think some other things for Metagross, it's a little bit into the opposing Metagross matchup, because you don't want to take that really, really strong Earthquake. So you definitely want to pair it with some ground immunities as well. I think Zapdos is a fantastic partner for Metagross, but that's not so I don't know what I'm trying to say here. Just use Zapdos and Metagross. Claydol is kind of a hybrid. It's not super duper offensive. It's only got the 70 base attack, but it does have Stab Earthquake, which is strong enough into a Tyranitar. In fact, the standard Claydol set that you'll see is designed to always 2-hit KO a Tyranitar, whether it's got HP investment, leftovers, or not. So that's pretty good. You could also run Ice Beam or Rock Slide if you want to hit the flying type Pokemon, particularly Salamence and Aerodactyl. And it has Explosion as well to get some momentum off against certain Pokemon. It can be nice against like really slow DD Tyranitar. Not that you really see that often. I don't recommend running slower than Claydol on a DD Tyranitar, but it's maybe a possibility that you would see it, or it's maybe a possibility that you're going to run a faster Claydol. So that could be important to know. It could also be important for setting up things like a Dugtrio trap. Claydol's already really good at doing that for Pursuit variants of Tyranitar. You'll switch on the Pursuit turn, tank it because Claydol has really good special defense, and then you're going to trap with Dugtrio. So, yeah. Needless to say, 3 of these Pokemon are immune to spikes, and 3 of these Pokemon, not even the same 3, are immune to sand. So, like, they have some decent longevity, especially the 2 in the middle. The only thing that could make them any better is if they had an instant healing move, but they don't, so keep that in mind. And I think we will go on to the next little slide here. We're going to talk about the Great Rock Resist. I mentioned earlier on accident that these Pokemon are just 2. Only 2 of them for the Great Rock Resist here. Which Pokemon am I going to give the honor of showing up first? Well, that is going to be Donphan. Yes, I know Donphan is not a super duper highly ranked Pokemon in terms of viability, but it is extremely good as a Rock Resist. The worst physical attack that Donphan can take from the rocks that we've been talking about is Choice Banded Metagross Meteor Mash. I mean, I guess, like, technically speaking, you could be like a +2 something or +3 something, but like, let's not get ahead of ourselves. If you're letting your opponent get to +2 and 3 on you, then like it doesn't really matter what Rock Resist you have. You're just gonna lose. So here is the roll here. This is a little bit higher on the defensive investment than your typical tank OU set shows, but I wanted to show this off because, oh, that's Explosion. That is silly of me. I was like, that's doing a lot more damage than I remember it doing in the calc. Okay, well, that was a little bit of a snafu. Trust me when I say that this puts the roll for Choice Banded Meteor Mash from Metagross so that the max that it's doing, you can click Protect, and the 2 turns of chip healing that you get mean that you will not die to the next Meteor Mash. That's a kind of a nice benchmark. You're gonna need to get chip on Metagross because you don't have enough attack investment to one-shot the Metagross with this particular investment in your defenses. You could also run the move Counter if you're specifically trying to bait a Metagross into that, but I wouldn't say that it's so great to do stuff like that because Metagross could always crit and it could always get the attack raise, and those 2 things can ruin you. But it also could just miss, and you're definitely 2-hit KOing Metagross with Earthquake, so don't worry too much about that. But let's talk about Tyranitar, who Donphan is just fantastic against. This is all the banded Tyranitar moves and their rolls on the particular Donphan spread that we looked at earlier. Keep in mind that banded Tyranitar very commonly, and in the case of these calculations, is adamant. So this is basically the most damage that Tyranitar is doing without getting to like +2 or something crazy like that. I did leave off Focus Punch. Know that Focus Punch does do about 50-ish%, but you can never be 2-hit KO'd by Focus Punch if you don't want to be, assuming this is like a Choice Banded Tyranitar, because you simply will just click Earthquake and kill the Tyranitar, right? You're not just gonna take a fat punch to the face going for something silly like Toxic, are you? I'm not calling out anybody in particular, but yeah, just don't end up on a clip and shown on replay of the week. So yeah, you can switch into a double edge pretty comfortably. Then you can take another one. After all that recoil damage, your Earthquake is just going to be smashing the Tyranitar. Now, that could be bad in the case that they are trying to chip out your Donphan so that something like Aerodactyl can win later, but Donphan with Protect, and if you can keep the hazards away, I know that Donphan is the spinner, so not super duper easy to ask it to do all of these things all at once, but even a low health Donphan can really just come back and win versus a Aerodactyl. So that's really nice. Now we have the serious music, and we're going to be talking about the Pokemon that I'm going to give the honor of #1 Rock Resist. And that's going to be, probably with no drama here, Swampert. So Swampert is just a fantastic Pokemon all around, but all of its traits come together to make it just a brutal counter to most of the physical attacking rock-ish Pokemon in the tier. So Water Ground resists both rock and steel without being weak to ground. So that gives Swampert an edge on pretty much all the Metagross sets. The only move that Metagross really has to hit Swampert in a lot of cases is Explosion. Now, sometimes it can run Toxic and sometimes it can run Hidden Power Grass, but like the most typical Metagross that you're going to see are not going to have a great move to hit the Swampert with. And Explosion is not a great move to have to click into Swampert because Swampert has Protect on a lot of its sets. So yeah, getting protected on the turn that you go for Boom, it's not great. Unlike Quagsire, Swampert has some real stats so that it can take hits better and dish out more damage. And it has access to Hydro Pump, which I sort of mentioned is a con for Quagsire. Hydro Pump with the extra special attack investment, or special attack that Swampert inherently has. You get a lot of kills with an uninvested Hydro Pump that you would never ever even get close to getting with Quagsire. Also, the ability Torrent makes your Hydro Pumps very dangerous if you're at low HP with a Swampert. And Swampert is pretty likely to still live a hit when it's down to like 30-ish%. There are a lot of moves and a lot of Pokemon that can't even do 30% to Swampert, so keep that in mind. As for the comparison to Quagsire, more specifically, this is the stat pool for Swampert. Okay, no, that's a lie. That's Quagsire. How many of the stats here do you think that Quagsire is better than Swampert at? The answer is none of them. Now let's go back. That defense, literally 5 more defense. Attack, more attack. We've got 5 more HP. We've got 20 more special attack. We have a good deal more Spadef and speed. Like, literally, Swampert is Quagsire's father. Well, okay, once again, I've been told that, in fact, Quagsire beats Swampert one-on-one, which I think is kind of true, right? Because you're immune to Hydro Pump. You can start going for curses to take less damage from Earthquake, and if you have Rest, then you don't care about Toxic. So, in fact, I do think I agree with that take, but in the general case of the versus the entire meta, Swampert is definitely a better Pokemon. So, yeah. But not to say so much about Swampert in its comparison to a lower ranked Pokemon, let's talk about what it really needs in order to be a really good and robust counter to your Rock Spam teams. And that's a normal resist. This is Aerodactyl, who is most commonly going to be the Pokemon that is sweating the Swampert matchup. Because Aerodactyl really wants to just sweep an endgame, and if Swampert is alive and healthy going into the endgame, then like Aerodactyl is just heavily pressured to get some damage on the Swampert. So against the standard defensive Swampert spread, a Choice Banded Double Edge is doing about 40% max, and if you have the standard defensive spread, you probably have Protect, so you have a lot of turns to chip heal. Very commonly, you can get out of 3-hit KO range with your Swampert. Sometimes you can even get out of 4-hit KO range, depending on how many turns they give you. But what really, really works well with Swampert is a normal resist, because you can get that Aerodactyl to lock into Earth or Double Edge, and then pivot to your normal resist, and then start doing something nasty with that. Examples would be like Gengar or Metagross or even Skarmory. These are Pokemon that you'll see very commonly paired with Swampert. I mean, they're all really just good Pokemon. So Swampert like benefits from being partners to them, and also just gives you a lot of defensive backbone. I've heard a rule of thumb that if you don't have Swampert, then you need 2 Rock Resists. I don't know, again, if I necessarily agree with that. There's plenty of offense teams that like operate at a completely different pace. There are some certain sets that you can try to help you out in certain matchups. But I do think that Swampert is the most self-sufficient of all the Rock Resists. Donphan is pretty darn close, but it does not have the like strong Hydro Pump, the ice coverage, the access to refresh, all of these things that Swampert has that make it just a fantastic Pokemon all around. And you know, I think that Swampert is such an interesting Pokemon that maybe I would want to do a video on it. So if we get to 1.1k subs, maybe I'll consider doing a Swampert video. And if you don't want to see a Swampert video at 1.1k subs, then let me know another Pokemon that you would want to see instead. For not Swampert believers in the chat, then I guess I'll give you what you want. And yeah, that's gonna be basically it. We'll do a little bit of a summary here. This is, again, not to be used as a tier list to say, oh, if I pick one Pokemon from the top tier, then I just counter all rock spam teams. Like, no, that's not the case. You're gonna have to still construct a very solid team versus the specific sets that each of these Pokemon run, in order to have a really good team overall. But I hope this kind of gives you a little bit of perspective. If you're like, man, I just hate running into Aerodactyl, and I don't know what to do against it, then, I don't know, maybe try some of the Pokemon that you see here on your team. Or if you're like, man, Metagross is so scary, but I can't afford to fit a Metagross counter over my Rock Resist. Well, it's like, well, some of these Pokemon are also pretty good at taking on Metagross, like Swampert, for example. So that could be a consideration for you. So yeah, take this to heart. Use it as your philosophy for building Pokemon. In all cases and all manners. In fact, you should just run the top 6 here. Then you will never lose to an Aerodactyl team in your life. I completely just undermined my whole conclusion right there on a whim, because I'm Tetrafolium and I can do that. But all right, I hope you enjoyed this, even though I was kind of rambly and losing my train of thought a little bit in the middle there. But you don't notice anyway. This is just background noise for you to go to sleep to. So take care and sweet dreams.